We are talking today with Rex Flanburg of Riverside, Iowa. Right? Yes. Okay. And interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Start us off with a little bit of background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Iowa City, Iowa, June 28th, 1949.
Okay. And did you live there, or was that just where the hospital was?
I actually lived in the town of Tiffany, which is 10 miles to the west.
Okay.
And I was there until I went to the service.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
My mother, for the most part at that time, was more of a housewife. My father and his brother ran a small hardware store in which they went out and did plumbing, heating, wiring, and air conditioning.
Okay.
So,
And did you finish high school?
yes.
What year did you graduate?
1967.
And what did you do after you got out of high school?
I worked for a furniture company, delivered furniture until I got my draft notice.
Okay. And so in that little period there, late 60s, you're finishing high school, you come out. Were you paying much attention to Vietnam?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would have found it on a map.
All right. But you were aware that people were getting drafted?
Yeah, I think the closer I got to getting drafted, I was finding out a little bit more about Vietnam.
All right. And so when do you get your draft notice?
My first induction date time was April 14th, 1969, and I was supposed to report to Fort Des Moines, or Camp Des Moines, whatever it was called, and I, going through all the diseases, because I'd had, tonsillitis and all that other stuff, but childhood stuff, and there was one called insomnialism. I didn't know what it was, and I wanted to be accurate, and so I asked Sergeant. He didn't know. He came back and said sleepwalking. And during my childhood, and even up till I probably went to service, my parents chased me around the house a couple times while I was asleep. So I marked it, and I got ready to get aboard the airplane. We were going to head to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and they called me off. And I thought I'd screwed up, and they sent me home because I had to have doctor's authorization. So I didn't know how long that was going to take, and so I actually went back to work, and until I had a friend come out about a month and a half later and says, your name's back at the top of the list, and so is his. He said, why don't we go together? I got another friend, we'll just all three go together, and maybe we'll get a good deal instead of being shipped over to Vietnam. We took it as a 2-year RA, and I found out later that was my ticket to Vietnam.
Now, did you basically volunteer for the draft, or did you just formally enlist?
I was a registered 2-year enlistee.
Okay. Okay, so you were not officially, so you had a different kind of serial number.
I had
for the draft.
RA instead of, I don't know what the other one was.
Yeah, U.S. or something, I think
Yeah.
is what they have for that. Okay, so you're a regular Army there. Okay, and so and you thought, and when you were signing up, were they giving you a little list of things
They
here?
don't really tell you that stuff, It was like, okay, this way we knew we can go together.
Yeah.
And, I thought, well, maybe I'd get a truck driving job, right? Because I drove a furniture van. I thought, well, maybe I could do this. And my father did some wiring and stuff. I could do some of that too. So, that might keep me out of the nasty stuff.
Okay, so when did you actually then report?
My induction date was Friday the 13th, June 13th, 1969.
Okay, and where do you go for basic training?
Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Okay.
B-35.
Okay. Do you remember how you got there?
Plane, and I was afraid of heights.
Okay. And what reception do you get when you arrive at Fort Polk?
My basic training company, and you always hear all the bad things, mine was good. I mean, the guys, they treated you like a human being, and, I'm guessing they're, and we didn't screw up, and we won the Commanding General's Trophy for that period of time, and so basic wasn't bad.
Were the guys in your training company mostly from the same part of the country, or were you all mixed up?
Well, I know on a lot of ours, a lot of them were guys that had enough college, they were going to war officer school,
Okay.
you know, but they had to do the basic. And we had, I remember the guy, a lot of them Midwest, you know, but you're talking 53 years,
Sure,
54
sure.
years,
Yeah.
and some of that stuff starts to go away.
Okay. And what did the basic training actually consist of?
Same thing that AIT does, you know, a lot of marches, a lot of, you learn how to shoot. We used an M14 instead of an M16. A little hand-to-hand, a little bit of, just about a little bit of everything, you know, you had to go out and do your little thing, but it wasn't bad. They just try to get you in shape because,
Okay. Were you doing much close order drill and just marching around?
yeah, I mean, of course you're thinking back then they're overdoing it, but you know, they did it. So you just figured, okay, this is my 8 or 9 weeks, and let me get through it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right. And now, this is summer, so was it hot and humid down there?
oh yeah.
How did that compare with Vietnam?
Louisiana is pretty hot, but Vietnam is really hot, and there's a big difference if you're going back to your barracks and get in and take a shower than not going anywhere and finding, you know,
And sleeping on the ground for a
sleeping
few
on the
weeks.
ground for a year.
Yeah. Okay. So you have, and that's 8 weeks?
It was 8 or 9 weeks, and
Yeah.
then we got our thing. We went to AIT, Advanced Infantry Training.
Okay. And did you stay at Fort Polk for that?
Yep, I went from south to north.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what did they do at Fort Polk to try to simulate Vietnam?
Made it miserable. I really didn't like our captain very well. He was a bully. Drill sergeants did what they had to do, but sometimes you go, you know, it's a little overboard. They didn't, where even in basic we had some time for leaves in AIT, they weren't giving you nothing.
Wow.
And just trying to make it miserable. I know one morning it was pretty chilly, and I was walking, and it was dark, and I had my hands in my pocket. Well, they caught me, and they had dropped me to do 20 push-ups or whatever it was. And it's not a problem, you know. But they always release you when you're done. And I'm pretty. If you ask my wife, I'm a pretty bullheaded person. If you're going to do it, let's do it by the rules. And they dropped me, and my drill sergeants walked off. And somebody says, "Go ahead, get out of there." I said, "No, I'm going to stay here until they come back out from breakfast, and they're going to release me, and they're going to feel like a fool," which they did. I was still there.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "What are you there for?" I said, "You didn't release me, drill sergeant. Get out of here. Get out of here."
Mm-hmm.
But
Did the captain? Do you think had the captain been to Vietnam?
I don't think so, because I saw while I was in Vietnam, his name showed up on as killed in action. I always wondered who did it.
Mm-hmm.
He was, you know, if it was friendly fire, or because he wasn't a friendly guy.
Okay. Okay. So you get through AIT another 8 weeks, roughly.
Yep. And then because of October, end of October, because I went home I had whatever it is, time off, and then I was shipped to Vietnam.
Okay. And
We
so
had a month.
yeah, and so you go back home for that month.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what was that like? Did you worry about it, or just?
I just knew I was going,
Yeah.
and you know, we sit around the dinner table. My mother was a great lady, and she goes, "You can take off and go to Canada."
Mm-hmm.
I go, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." My dad's a World War II vet,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes, "No, he's not going to do that." I said, "No." I said, "I'll do it."
Okay.
So,
All right. So how did they get you to Vietnam?
airplane.
Okay.
By then I was starting to get a little bit more comfortable about going up in the air, and we flew from Seattle or Tacoma, whatever it's out there, and we flew up to Alaska. So I thought, whoa, there's Alaska, it's cold out there.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "You get off the plane," and go, "Nope, I'm sitting right near the plane." And And then we went to Yokota Air Force Base in Japan, and then from there to Cameron Bay.
And what's your first impression of Vietnam?
My first impression, we got off the airplane, and it was middle of the night, and I still remember Air Force guys coming out of the movie theaters with the wax and everything, and this is Vietnam. Yeah, I soon learned.
Yeah, that was Air Force.
It was a little different than what I got trained to do.
Yeah. Okay. And at that point, did you know what unit you were going to,
No.
or are you still waiting on that?
They put everybody in the barracks, and they had roll calls every 2 or 3 hours where everybody go out, and they might run off 25, 30 names and said, you're going to Marical, you're going to Bloody Red 1, you're going to 101st and the Air Cav. And I just said, whatever you do, God, don't put me in an airborne unit, because I did not want to go in a damn helicopter.
Of course.
And my one good friend, he goes, oh, you really want to go airborne? I go, and he got children, he went to Marical. And I said, God, I wish I was you. And he goes, let me know. He said, when you find out. I went out on the next, probably 1 in the morning, and I got my name called for the Delta Company, 2nd of 506 Airborne. And my heart just went, I was not a happy camper.
Okay. So at that point, where was the 101st Airborne based?
We were at Camp Evans.
Okay, where in Vietnam is that?
North of Da Nang, north of Hue, H-U-E,
Yeah.
and around Quang Tri. Camp Evans and Camp Eagle Camp's pretty close together.
Yeah.
We're in there.
Okay. You're up there, and then once you arrive, what do they do with you?
Well, I sort of walked around, and it was starting to rain about that time because it was in November, and you know, you're still don't know what the hell. You haven't met anybody because they're all out in the, but they were bringing everybody back for a stand down.
Mm-hmm.
And my first impression was, what a bunch of drunk people. Because when they came back, we never got beer or alcohol or anything out in the field, but they sure did it when they got back, and it was like, man, this is my company, but I'm glad I went with them.
Okay. I don't know, were you much of a beer drinker back home?
No, I didn't drink.
Didn't drink, yeah, at all.
I
Okay.
drank afterwards.
But anyway, so yes, you come in, and it is kind of a sort of strange experience. What was there like a sergeant or company clerk, somebody back in the rear area that could give you your equipment and that
Yeah,
kind of thing?
they gave my equipment and, excuse me, food. My rucksack was really bad. I didn't have a frame on it, and it was really hard on the back. And for one thing, I really didn't know how to pack it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time we went out, it was like having back problems. And once we got back, we found an old somebody thrown away and jerry rigged it, and that's what I had until I left. So never had a problem then after that.
All right. So how did the guys in the unit treat you when you joined them?
You know, yeah, you're a cherry, but I thought, good, you're just part of the family, you know.
Do they make an effort to kind of explain to you how stuff worked, or just say do what we do?
For one thing, I don't think, not necessarily. They tell you what you're going to do, and you did it. You know, you stayed your distance. You did what you were asked to do, and I thought our company was really a good one.
Okay. And do you, let's see, so you're joined, so late in the year in 69, so November 69. Now, how quickly did you go out in the field then after you
Right
joined?
away.
Okay.
They were for whatever it was, stand down. I don't remember the day we went out.
Okay.
I know it was raining. It rained for the next 3 months or whatever it was. And so you learned how to climb hills, you know, and because I don't ever remember walking in flatland, hardly ever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I mean, there was a period there at the beginning of 1970 when they were based at a fire base called Jack, which was
what?
Fire base Jack.
Yeah, I went to Jack.
That was in the lowlands, but I guess there were still hills around, and you were still
we were on Jack for, I know it had to be in January, December, January. And Jack was okay, but it was a lot flatter. Probably, we really didn't ever do any walking around it because we were just there.
Okay.
And then we went, I don't know if it went from there to Granite. I know when I came into the service, before I even got to where I was, I ended up on Rakkasan and Gladiator, because that's where I had my Thanksgiving dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I still wasn't even at company yet, so I was, you know.
So you're bouncing around a little bit.
I'm bouncing around.
Yeah.
And then once we got there, like I said, I was in Delta Company, and we went to Jack, and then I don't know if it's that or the Gladiator, or vice versa, which one was first, but then we started getting this call in for we're going to do the Operation Texas Star.
Okay.
Even though we didn't care what the name of it was, that's just what they called
Okay.
it.
So that then, which begins in March. So in those first few months there, were you just doing patrolling in the hills?
Patrolling the hills, and I think when we went on the last one, we were trying to get treated so much for jungle rot,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody had it. Some of them had it really bad. You know, your hands, you can't, after a while, you can't close them, and you get something in a leg and it doesn't heal, and the jungle rot was nasty during the monsoons.
All right. Is it basically just really stubborn infections?
Yeah, those plants over there were so sharp, you know, they'd cut you, and then because you're never dry, nothing heals.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't heal, it's going to get infected.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Kind of getting that. Okay. Who was your company commander at that point?
Be honest with you, the only one I really remember is Rollinson, and I got him in when we were starting. The other guys,
Okay. So whoever came before, they kind of came and went. Do you remember any of your platoon leaders?
yeah, my platoon leader was John Flaherty. He's the one I probably knew the best.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lieutenant, and then I mean my squad leaders, George Strasberg, and then the other ones are Jay, and so yeah, I knew once we're in our platoon, I knew that everybody,
Right.
pretty much.
Okay. So for you, there's not a whole lot that's hugely memorable about the first few months in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then when so now we begin the Texas Star operation. It sort of begins on the 12th of March when they try to put a company onto what will eventually become Ripcord. But that was Alpha Company that went out. Were you patrolling in the area at that time, or?
You know, they really never tell you where you're at.
Okay.
So we could have been,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, they moved us around, or we're pulling an artillery barrage in the hills, and still at about the same time, and we'd go. I know I have one where we had went in on a hot LZ on the 25th of January. We did other ones. You know, you're just doing stuff. You know, and you don't really know where you're at. And but I remember going the day that they really brought the company in, and you could hear the fire from where they dropped us off, and then everybody just had their own perimeter. They just kept making that big circle,
Mm-hmm.
and we never had any problems whatsoever for the most part. You know, we got my first kill person I saw killed was we were hit by our own gunships,
Mm-hmm.
and to me that was pretty traumatic. You know.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned going into a hot LZ back in January. Was that your first time really under fire, or had you been shot at
Yeah,
before?
well, we were just flying around, and we had Cobras going in and going out, and they said we were being shot at, and you know, I didn't, you know, yeah, somebody might have been shooting at us, but by the time my helicopter got in there, I think it was pretty well over.
Okay.
You know.
All right. Now, when you're first going out in the field, and would your unit operate as a whole company or split into platoons?
Ours, we split in platoons. Sometimes the captain and his squad would travel with first platoon, sometimes the second, sometimes the third.
Right.
You know, he just floated in there. And most of the time we were on our own.
Okay. And where in those first months? I mean, were you encountering much when you were out in the field?
Mm.
Yeah.
I always sort of remember that it seemed like the end of the month, somewhere along that last 8 or 9 days of the month, somebody shot at you.
Mhm.
It might be for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. You never seen them, and it was all over. You go, okay, there's January or February.
Okay.
You know, March. You know,
Okay.
but then it got a little hairier than that after.
All right. So Ripcord the fire base gets established in April on try number 3, and now the companies in 2nd Battalion 506 they alternate being up on the base, and otherwise they're marching around. Did Delta Company spend time up on the hill?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I'd have to look in their little records, see when we went on. But I know when they first landed on Ripcord, we could hear the fighting or guns going on.
Yeah.
And we were on one side, and we'd heard, it was probably 4 or 5 in the afternoon, it sounded like the whole NVA army was coming after us. And we all hunkered down and found out it was monkeys going through the trees, rock heaps. Scared the hell out of us. But we didn't have anything, and we worked for a week or two, and we finally got up, getting ready to go on Ripcord. We were on Hill 1000, and there was freshly dug bunkers there and stuff, but nobody there. But they wanted us on Ripcord so we could let the other company go, whoever was up there. So we didn't do anything. We walked on Ripcord, and we were there for a week or to help build Ripcord back up, run wire and dig out.
Okay, so they were still working on
They were still
defenses,
working on it.
because Charlie Company was up there first, and you may have taken over from them.
Might have been.
Yeah. Okay. Now, at that point in time, when you're up there on Ripcord, did you feel like that would be a secure place to be, or were you not so sure about it?
Thought, man, this is nice. To be honest with you. Yeah, every once in a while somebody drop a mortar in and you'd go, woohoo! But then it was all over.
Yeah.
And then we'd go off, and the next time we come back it wasn't quite as nice as the first time. I know we had been up there in May or somewhere then, because I know on my birthday in June, I was there on my birthday. And so then I had to take went out with a squad, and I told the lieutenant, I said, don't you want to see me get past 21? I wasn't real happy about leaving, because by then they were starting a lot more stuff in the end of June.
Okay. Well, when you were sent out with a squad, what was the purpose of that?
For protection, just see what's going on.
Okay.
And so we made our little search and came back. And,
Well, were you trying to find machine gun or mortar positions?
just trying to make sure there's nothing really close, and we didn't draw fire, so they still weren't shooting at us at that point.
All right. Now, so basically you're kind of back and forth. Sometimes you're on the base, sometimes you're out there patrolling in the jungle. And if you're going through at least May and June, were you still not having much contact?
No, I mean, you were doing things. I know I was looking up on some of those old reports, because I had found, I walked point till I got to July. So that's 9 months of walking point.
Okay. How did you wind up with that job?
I liked it.
Okay.
Not that I liked it, but I felt like I know what I'm looking for. And I found a lot of little things on the way, and you'd find some shells over here, you'd find a weapon or two over here, and I'd call back, and then we'd have to wait. And guys were after a while say, if you see that, just don't say anything, because it made it a little slow. I didn't mind it, but once it got to about July, and it started getting a little hairier, I said, I think I've had enough.
When you were walking point before July, I mean, did you ever actually run into any North Vietnamese?
No, I did find a 500-pound bomb that was booby-trapped.
Okay. And how did you spot that?
I just saw something up by a tree, and I stopped there by it, and I said, there's just something up by this tree, and so they said, well, where is it? So it was trail that went up and made a hard right, or look sort of a right, and the tree was up there. And when I did it, we sort of cut through the brush instead of walking the trail. And it was, they figured it was 500 pounds. It was 16 inches around and 4 or 5 foot long.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually had markings on it. And I don't think it would have gone off, but it was booby trapped. It had a wire halfway around. If I would have gone around that thing and it did, it would have killed us all.
Mm-hmm.
But we found it, backed away, 500 pounds. And so we went back to where we were staying that night. And the next morning, the lieutenant said I had to go back and blow it up. It was me and 3 other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's down the hill, you go blow it up. I don't know if I used as nice words as that, but, and I said, no, you know where it's at. I go, yeah, I know where it's at. But we went down and blew it up.
So how did you do that?
Probably not the way the book says.
Okay.
We took 3 pounds of C4, buried it, and you're supposed to be, from what I always heard, reports of something 500 pounds, you're supposed to be half a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
We had wires off of 3 Claymore mines, which is 50 foot. We're 150 foot away when we blew it. But we found us, wasn't much of an indentation, but it was down a little bit from that when we blew it.
Did you feel the concussion when it blew?
Your head felt like a bowl of jello. You swear you could feel your brains going back and forth. And, but, we got up and sort of grinned and go, wow, we did it. We walked back, and our other guys weren't, I don't think they were probably 400 yards away, 400 yards away. They said a lot of stuff came up that hill. Said, you were probably safer where we were. And I said, yeah, but you don't want to be down there.
All right. So that's kind of one adventure. And did you have a feeling that there were more NVA around?
Oh yeah, they were there. We were in the same spot. I don't know if it's, because one time we was in the same spot twice,
mm-hmm.
and I think it was our second time. There was a trail below, down by where the bomb had gone, where
mm-hmm.
the bomb was booby trapped, and there was 4 or 5 bunkers down there. And we went down one time and put CS cannons, or big, looks like paper bags full of CS.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had 5 of them. I had 2 grenades. I just volunteered. I have no idea why. And what we were going to do was count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pull the pins, and I had 2 of them that was close. So I threw one, threw the other one, and ran like blazes till we get far enough away and wait for them to blow. And that's what we did. Except I hit a tree root about 5 feet, and I went flying in the air and flattened my back. But I guess sometimes it wasn't very graceful.
Okay. But you didn't take any shrapnel from the grenade?
No. I mean, we threw them down. It was their bunkers are covered,
mm-hmm.
and you just find the doorway and throw one down and throw the other one down. I mean, all that C4 or that gas goes up and.
Now, was that like gas
just
crystals?
Powdered,
yeah.
Powdered, yeah, tear gas.
Yeah, the impact
I
printed
don't know if
gas.
I said it that way, but it's powdered tear gas.
Yeah. I've heard of that being used in places before.
Mm-hmm.
You spread it there, or they would put it in the tunnels a lot, and if the guys went over, then it would turn to gas. Yeah, okay. And then, are there other things that kind of happen before we get into July that kind of stand out for you?
Yeah, when I was on Jack, I was myself and Doug Puffer. You met Doug down. We volunteered for something. It was either that or go burn poop, So we took and we were to qualify for flamethrowers.
Okay.
And so us 2 volunteered, and they trained us, and we were there's only 4 of us in the battalion, and we're 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we just learned how to use a flamethrower, which is a hoot until they need you. And so We did that on Fire Base Jack.
Okay. Did you ever actually have to use a flamethrower in the field?
They called us in from the, I don't remember, it would have been in June or July. And we boarded the helicopters, flew in, we had to get our stuff. They said there's somebody out there and you can't get their guys close enough. We're gonna, and you're sitting on a helipad with flamethrower and figured, okay, this wasn't so smart.
And you've got tanks full of highly flammable stuff.
And it only lasts for 4 seconds. People don't realize, you watch on TV, they just last forever, but it's only 4 seconds. And I still remember, it's 2,300 pounds per square inch, or pounds, and when you light it, it only lasts for 4 seconds. And you've got your hands full, so, you know, they give you a 45 to take, and you have to be sort of out in the middle of nowhere when you shoot it, so we kept thinking, oh God, now we're both gonna get killed.
Mm-hmm.
And we waited, and pretty soon it started getting dark. He said, okay, you're gonna do it first thing in the morning, which is awesome. Now I get to think about it all night. So we got up the next morning, went down to the helipad, and we were ready to go, but he said, nah, we figured a different angle, and I kept thinking, whew. At least it didn't, you know, that was good.
All right. Now you had mentioned your company commander in the Ripcord period, Rollison. What impression did you have of him?
He was about as fine as CO you could have. I mean, he wasn't one of those that's going to say, okay, you 5 go up the hill with the thought of, well, if you lose them, you lose them. He thought of a lot of his men. He didn't want anybody killed needlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what but he was an Airborne Ranger. He was huge to me. I was probably 5'7", 130, 5'8", 130 pounds. He was probably 6'3" or 4", 220.
Mm-hmm.
You know, perfect football player. He was just a great guy.
Okay. Now, when you're out in the field with him, how long would you be out before you went back to the base?
It depended. The longest I went without a change of clothes was 36 days.
Okay. Now, when you're out there for an extended period, I mean, what do you do at night? You're out in the field somewhere.
I played a lot of cards. There's maybe 2 groups. There's ones that's going to lose everything, you know, and then there's other ones. We had 3 or 4 guys in our platoon. We just played spades or hearts or rummy or something like that, you know.
But I mean, but if you're out there in the field someplace, I mean, there are presumably bad guys out there somewhere.
Yeah, but and when your time comes, you pull. You know, everybody's out pulling their watch.
Okay.
But you know, when you're sitting around, a lot of times you're during the day, and
Yeah.
you're not going anywhere. We play cards, or you run up. Okay, maybe we got 30 guys. 10 of them were off doing they might go out and do a night watch.
And it might watch. Would you set ambushes or things like that?
Set ambushes.
Okay.
You know, you go out, but there's a lot of times we didn't. I mean, there just was no place to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Ashley Valley is just not the best place to experiment with where you want to go, I don't think.
Or split up your unit into too many pieces.
Yeah, you want to get enough where you're close enough you can get some help.
Okay. Now, as you kind of get into July and more things start to happen, because of July 1st and 2nd, that's when Charlie Company gets hit on Hill 902. And July 1st is when the more regular bombardment of the fire base starts to happen. What is your company doing that first week of July?
First week of July, we were on Fire Base Ripcord.
Okay.
I don't know how many days we'd been there, but I know we walked off on July 6th.
Okay.
We walked off, and we probably weren't 150 yards away, and we're making our NDP, or a little
defense position, yeah.
Echo Company was ahead of us. They had a squad, they had a sniper weapon, and they got hit going uphill 1,000.
Okay. Now, Echo Company was a sort of a
They
composite.
were recon.
They had the recon platoon. They also had the mortar platoon. So the recon is really just a platoon.
Yeah, that was a recon.
They were there. So the recon platoon is out there, and then they get hit. And then what do you guys do?
They send us up to rescue them, Well, actually, what they did was he sent a squad of us up there to rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me a radio, which they never should have done. I never had a radio. I mean, I've been there 7 months, but that wasn't my job. And the captain gave me their radio, and when we went up there, my squad leader, when we got up to where the wounded guys was, he said, "You stay here." He said a couple other ones were going to go up the hill and see if we can help the other ones. But he said, "You stay down here with the wounded." I said, "Okay." And this is where I probably had one of my first run-ins with Black Spade.
Mm-hmm. Which would be Lieutenant Colonel Lucas, the battalion commander.
And we were in one little pod, and if you ask me where the other guys was, you're in triple canopy. You have no idea if they're left,
Mm-hmm.
if they're in front, if they're 150 yards ahead of you, or 150 to the side. You had no idea. And he called and said, "Okay, we want to help you guys out. We're going to give you some mortar fire." And I said, "No, sir, we don't want mortar fire." I said, "We're not sure where our friendlies are." And I said, "We don't need any extra injuries because and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And I still remember they dropped 2 mortars in on us, and they came right in on us,
Mm-hmm.
except they were Willie Pete, the white
That's
phosphorus.
white phosphorus. That's not good.
And the guy started screaming, and I got back on the radio and told Black Spade off. I mean, I didn't just a little bit tell him off. I screamed at him, and I didn't use real nice language at all.
Did he know who you were at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay.
If he did, I would have been in jail. And he goes, "Oh, and he wondered who it was, and I told him none of his business. I said, "I'm not going to want to be responsible for what people you're going to try to kill." And I just, and he got quiet, and we started getting some of our guys back. They were coming back, and he goes, "Well, they had a quad 50, and they had it pointed up that direction." And I said, "Sir, we're okay. We can do the job. Just let us do it." And then he said, "Well, we're going to do it." I said, "You start shooting at us. I swear to God, I'll start shooting back at you." I said, and then I let go with a bunch more. And they weren't just 1 or 2 words. They were whole paragraphs. And finally, he just let us do our work. We got everything down. They didn't get the sniper weapon because he couldn't get at it.
Mm-hmm.
And we got down, and I walked back, and I thought, well, I'm going to be busted. And Rollinson, he said, "Flanburg, get over here." And I thought, "Oh God, I'm dead." I handed him the radio, and he said, "You shouldn't talk that way on the radio." And I said, "He shouldn't." I said, "We didn't need help." And I said, "I did what I had to do to get it called off." And I said, "Nobody got hurt." And I handed the radio, and he said, "Just go back to position." And I thought, "Oh God, I'm still alive."
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Okay. Now, did Rollinson have a radio himself, or did you have his radio?
They, because we were a company size, so
Yeah.
there's 4 or 5 radios in that whole group. So yeah, somebody had it.
Okay, but so would somebody with the command group?
I'm guessing I had his radio. All I know is when it started off, they gave me a radio.
Yeah.
Came out of that.
I guess the question was there anybody else listening in while you were
I'm
arguing?
sure he did. I'm sure. I mean, we would probably been either snickering or going, "I can't believe he said that."
But
I wasn't happy.
Yeah, but Rollinson didn't cut into the conversation. And
No, but right, I didn't use the correct, but I wasn't going to let him kept dropping stuff
Well,
without,
Sure.
saying, "Hey," when we had everything under control.
Okay.
So,
Now that's July 6th. And
that was July 6th.
you spend the night in the field out there?
Yes, right beside Ripcord. And we had to still dig our holes. I mean, we were 50, we weren't very far away. And next morning we had to go back up the ridge line, and then hell broke loose on July 7th. So.
Okay. Now, were you going up Hill 1000 or a position?
Hill 1000.
All right. So what happens that day?
We take off and go, and I still remember everybody getting together, and I don't think we thought it was going to be with the whole company going up. You know, you got 100 or whatever we had left for guys. They were going to screw with us, but I know first platoon went one way, second platoon went, or we were on another one, and we were almost up there. And first thing I remember is like a whoop, like a hand grenade or a satchel charge was to my right. Then there was one to my left, and I still had really, you know, then there was little small arms, and by then I'm laying on the ground, and we heard somebody yell for medic, and I thought, oh God, somebody got shot, and so that's when we lost PFC, Grimm, Michael Grimm, and because I crawled up to George Strasberg, and I said, George, who got hurt? He said, it's Grimm. I said, well, how is he? He said, he's dead. And he was probably 15 feet away, 20 feet away, and almost laying next to it, up by a tree, and his eyes were open, and no blood, no nothing, you know. I think it was one shot to the heart. And I had, at that point, he said, well, okay. He said, well, you're up. Go get his radio from him. Me and the radios, I guess. And I said, George, he's right over there. You go get the radio. Like I said, I'm pretty bullheaded at times. And he goes, no, go get it. I said, all right. So I crawled over, and I'm 5'8". Or that's what I always told people. And probably less. But Grimm was 5'10" or 5'11", and had the radio strapped across, and I had, with dead weight, try to get it off him. I stood up, and there was 3 shots went off, bang, bang, bang. And you could just feel them going by you. I laid on the ground, and I go, Jesus Christ. George says, are you hurt? I said, it's too damn close. And so I figured if you're laying down, they couldn't see me, so I pulled him over, and I shut his eyes, and I worked the radio loose, and took it back to him. I said, there's your radio. He says, Flaherty is what Tom got. They're down the hill, and they've lost the radio, and Gott's been hit too. He said, take this radio down to them. And he says, Flaherty wanted some hand grenades. I said, what the hell does he need hand grenades for? He said, I don't know. He said, he had 2, I had 2. I said, okay, we got 4. So off I went. Radio, Sim-16, and 4 hand grenades. Crawled down. And I still remember when I got down there, they were behind some deadfall, and Lieutenant's eyes were big as saucers. And Tom was sitting over there, and he said, how bad he hit? This is not bad. He had shot went through his hand, the radio, or his belly, and into the radio. And I said, are you okay? He goes, yeah, I'll be all right. Jack Flaherty said, where is everybody? I said, I don't know, Strasburg's sort of right up there. He said, can you get us to them? And I said, yeah, I'll get you back up there. And so he starts throwing these hand grenades, and I went to get God up. About the time I started going over a piece of deadfall, 3 more shots rang out. I thought, that's 4, 5, 6. He still hadn't hit me yet. And I laid back. We were over, and I'm laying on my belly again. I said, if you guys are going up, you're going up my way. We ain't standing up. We crawled up the hill. We got everybody out. So, and I think at Strasburg, Georgia, by that time had crawled up. I didn't know where he went, but I got everybody else up, and I helped tend to Tom. And George had crawled up next to this bunker, evidently was shooting at us. And they both fired at the same time, and they were point blank range, both of them. And the one with the Vietnamese one that caught George in the helmet liner and just turned his, looked like a great big, turned that steel pot out like this. And George couldn't hear nothing. You'd ask him a question, he'd just grin at you. You okay? He'd just grin at you. I said, can you hear? He goes, you know, he just couldn't hear. You get him? He said, well, I was only 2 feet away. I don't think I missed. But we weren't shot, so I'm guessing he did get whoever was shooting at us. But, and by that time, we sort of got a hold of took what wounded we had. We went back just outside Ripcord again. And that's where 2nd platoon or 3rd platoon lost a couple guys, Beals, and
So the company is sort of going up. The whole company is attacking different parts of the same hill, but the platoons are separate and the squads are kind of fanned out too. So you only know what a few of them are doing.
Yeah, our platoon for the most part was going up as a platoon, and I'm guessing the other ones sort of did the same. I mean, later on July 8th, we sort of, I know, we sort of fanned out a little bit, because all of a sudden on July 8th we were in no man's land again.
Right. So, so basically, did you camp in the same place that you'd done that before, or did you do?
We did again, same place.
Okay.
You know, and you get back on July 7th, and I think Black Spade was talking, oh, we gotta go back up that hill again.
Yeah.
And Robinson was good. He said, hey, our guys are hot, they're tired, we'll do it. You know, we're not going back up, right? Not, you know. And all that would have done is get somebody else killed. And so they were working out things. We heard they wanted to drop big bombs on them, and 500 pounders and 1,000 pounders, and it was like, you know, and of course that's what we hear. Probably wasn't truth to nothing, but then the next morning they said, oh, they're going to run airstrikes in on it, and we'll follow them up. And, you know, so that's what we did. You're going up and there's bombs bursting overhead and, you know, stuff flying everywhere, and you go, oh, just like the songs, you know. And didn't think anything could be back up there. Didn't think that, you know, but we were wrong again.
So what did you see and experience that day?
That day?
Yeah.
I was mad. I was supposed to leave for my R&R on July 7th. Here it's July 8th. And so, to quite be honest, I was probably doing a lot of bitching. But I mean, you had to have something that you're looking forward to. But we went up under airstrikes. We got to a certain point, and we were there, and I think another company was there, but we were told we were going up over the top. And I think Robinson had one platoon sort of going one way to go up, another one was going the other way, and we were 3rd platoon, and we were supposed to, you know, work our way through the saddle, which is all bombed out.
Well, it was a hill that had 2 peaks on it, and for the most part you were going to be attacking on one end of it and Charlie Company on the other, but there was a saddle in between the two.
There was a saddle in there that, I mean, it wasn't much. I mean, it was just a dip in the land.
Right.
And all of a sudden I found myself at point one more time. And, you know, to me, well, it wasn't going to be bad. I mean, they just blew the top of the hill off, there's nothing there. And so, grabbed my 16. By that time, I quit bitching probably long before that, because I knew I got to get, and I knew, I looked at myself and said, you're going to get hurt if you keep screwing around this, and just do what you have to do.
Right.
And we got up there, and all of a sudden I'm point again, but we're just going up a bombed out saddle. It just looked like a plowed field almost. And so we left some, what wasn't bombed, I mean, that was still brush and good jungle, and we got about 50 yards maybe up the saddle, and we were taking machine gun fire. And I still remember, I'm laying there and I go, Jesus Christ, again, you know. And I'm laying there, and there should have been at least 10 guys with us, and I turn around and my slack man, I can't even remember who it was, but there was like 4 of us out there, and we were in, and then there was some downfall from a bomb, from a blast, and all of a sudden, here comes Black Spade in his little Loach helicopter, and I go, oh, here comes Black Spade. And he flies overhead, and he wasn't his treetop level. I mean, you can see everybody. I wanted to wave, but I didn't. I wanted to go raise my hand up. And he just gets out, and he's probably just 10 meters maybe in front of me, and he throws out, and one of the guys behind me goes, hand grenade, frag. I go, and I could see when it was coming out, it was a smoke canister. And I said, no. I turned around and said, they're marking our position, the friendlies, you know. And I still remember watching that smoke canister roll down the hill and hit my right foot. And they burned pretty hot, so I just took my foot and sort of kicked it away. And it was a red canister. They marked us as the bad people. And I said, they've marked us as red, you know. And about that time, I turned around and low crawled back into this deadfall, which is a lot of brush and down trees. And we watched little Loach go up to the top of the hill, and we knew what he was going to do. The little door gunner was going to walk it in on us and kill us. And one of the guys back there said, what are you going to do? And I said, if one shot comes our way, I'm taking him out. I said, I don't care if it's Colonel, I don't care if it's anybody. This is our lives too. And so I said, just, if they shoot at us, take them out. And which we didn't want to do, because probably wouldn't have done anything anyway, but when it got to the top of the ridge line, you heard a small arms fire, pop, pop, pop. And, you know, you're getting a lot of that. But the little chopper just sort of had a little motion to it, which wasn't normal, and then it just buzzed off. And we just thought, lieutenants or somebody said, hey, those are our guys you just marked. And I thought, well, when we're at that point, that's good, you know. But when we found out that later on that the helicopter had received fire from the bad guys, we go, I've come home and I swear to God that NVA soldier saved our lives. And it was my other run out with Mr. Andre Lucas.
All right. So you're up there, do you get an order to go back down, or what happens?
But when we got done with that one, we just, because we weren't going to, I mean, it was a turkey shoot if you want to walk across that. If you just stood up and kept walking. And if you're going to do it, you had to be under cover of some sort and find a different way to get up the top of that hill. So we pulled back, and the rest of our platoon or squad and everything was still into the heavy brush before they shot at us, and they stayed there. So, but then we walked back down again, you know.
So as far as you can tell, the platoon leader didn't try to make more of them go up, or do you have no idea?
No, we weren't. We definitely weren't going to go back up that way. And, but you know, you're sitting there on the Spec 4, and it probably should have been busted 2 days earlier, and I'm not going to ask questions. So we just did what it. Pretty soon we ended up going back.
But the rest of the platoon should have been with you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, our platoon, they just didn't find any good way of going. I think. I don't know. All I could do is see what happened to our squad.
All right. So you get back down, and
I went darn.
And then
I don't know, and I'm guessing I made it back to Ripcord, and the chopper came in, and they got rid of, you know, they let me go back. Then I went on R&R, and I was going to go to Australia, and I missed the flight, and there wasn't a whole lot left open, so I went to Japan. So when I came back, I said, well, we had our stuff all ready to go, and they said, no, we don't, just hold it tight. We'll see what happens with Ripcord. We may be abandoning it. You know, we didn't know what had happened in the last week. So.
So you didn't go, so was the rest of your company someplace else at that point?
They were somewhere.
Okay.
And I know they went and pulled out, was it Bravo Company or whatever?
Well, they helped Alpha Company
Or
out.
Alpha Company out.
And actually they did,
And, yeah,
yeah, and a company of D1506 the day before, so they went out the 22nd and the
Yeah.
23rd to do that, but they were not flying out of Evans.
right, so
Yeah, so you
I
went
mean,
with
we-
them, yeah.
we got back, we could have done it. I mean,
Mhm.
we were ready to go. We had our rucksacks, we had all our weapons and our ammo, we were ready to catch a flight. But they said they weren't sending anybody out there until they figured out what was going on.
Okay.
So,
And then, did you see as they got brought back to Evans?
yeah, about the next thing I remember is we're going to Memorial for 61 people. And I'd heard Black Spade had gotten killed.
Yeah.
And my first question is, who did it?
Mhm.
Which probably wasn't appropriate. I'm sure it wasn't. But then I found out what happened to him. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, and then, what do you then do after that? And do you stay with the company and go back out?
I
and
was
patrol
always,
again?
I always stayed with Delta Company.
Mhm.
We'd get somebody that came out, let's say from the engineers,
Mhm.
and they'd want their infantry badge, which is a big thing in promotions. And we get shot at from somewhere, and next thing he's gone. We get somebody else, and it was just, we had 2 or 3 in there, and it's just, a couple of them were really good, would have been good infantry guys, and then some other ones, it's like, yeah.
So were you back to patrolling in the hills at that point?
I never got out of the hills.
Yeah.
My, I decided to take care of your radio on, I think that was the last thing I decided to do. And, we always had the little book of codes. Yeah, it was a little, we always had it with a big, we always had ours tied, and I had it in my pocket on the side. And I'd probably done it for a week or 2 weeks, and I was getting, they'd send out new codes, and they'd destroy the old one and everything. And my last day in the field, we probably had about 500 yards or 1,000. It wasn't super hard, but we had to climb up some banks and do other things, and through some brush. And we got up to the thing, and the lieutenant goes, he said, wants to send this back. I reached in, it was gone. A branch caught it, and it was gone. And I knew when I had it, and he was about ready to have me court-martialed, and I said, no, I said, I had it. I said, look, it was here. And it was another thing I probably shouldn't have done. I grabbed my M16, I said, I'll go get the goddamn thing. He said, where are you going to get it? I said, where I dropped it. He said, where'd you drop it? I said, I don't know. And no NVA soldier would have wanted to get in front of me because I was pissed.
Mhm.
I mean, I was mad at myself for losing it. And then I was mad to think he thought if I'd lost on purpose.
Right.
And so I probably went 100 or 200 yards. And I remember climbing up a bank, and there's brush. And I got back to that point, probably 200 yards all by myself. And I found it.
Mhm.
And put it back in my pocket, went up there, and went back in. I said, there it is. And he didn't even ask me. I said, I had an idea. I knew I had it at one time. I said, I found it. That night, I started feeling sick, and I don't know what it was from. But 3 in the morning, I had a temperature almost 105.
Wow.
And I was delirious. I didn't feel good. I mean, I was sick.
Mhm.
And they called in a medevac for me and I spent a week in the hospital. They thought I might have had malaria. It just went away.
Okay. Well, had you taken anti-malarial drugs?
You take some, and some you don't,
Okay.
you know. And I don't remember doing it. Well, that one day I was just so damn mad it didn't really matter.
All right.
But like I said, I spent 7 days in the hospital, and I got out. When I was walking out, my lieutenant was in one of the beds. I said, "What's the matter with you?" He said, "I got whatever you had."
Mm-hmm.
But it took him 3 or 4 days to get it, and I said, "Well, good luck." And I went back to our spot, our Delta company, and the A said, "You ready to go back on the field?" I said, "Yep." I said, "Whatever you want me to do." And he said, "Do you want to go back?" I had 32 days left of service. He said, "You want to go out, or do you want to pull bunker guard?" I said, "If I pull bunker guard, you gonna put me on KP?" And I said, "If you are, send me back to the field." He said, "Nope, pull bunker guard at night, come in, the rest of the day's yours." He said, "I'll go out," and I did it for 2 weeks. Came back one day and they said, "Pack your stuff, you're going home." The day I was going home, we had another soldier, Sergeant Black, who was probably my sergeant at that time, because George was gone, and he got killed. And if I'd left earlier, I wouldn't have known it, but Sergeant Black was a great guy.
Okay.
And that was my...
That was it. All right. So, do you remember the trip home?
Yeah.
So.
It was a lot like remembering the trip over. I remember going over, your 200 guys, it was Capital Airways that we flew, and I think it was the same plane on the way back. We had, a lot of guys were positive, but I remember some of the guys in my Vietnam that went over for my AIT goes, I had one of them, or 2 of them goes, we ain't coming back, we're going to get killed over there. And I remember reading their names in Stars and Stripes. I looked at them and said, "Screw you guys, I'm coming home." And, and I remember the flight back. It was good, and then it was late at night, or early morning, whatever it was, and the pilot goes, "If you look out the windows," you said you could see the shorelines of the USA. And all the lights went out in the airplane. And it was just quiet. It was just deathly quiet. I mean, just guys that just relieved seeing.
All right, so we have now at this point kind of gotten you back to SeaTac. You've made it back in the United States. Do you get discharged from there, or do they take you to Fort Lewis or someplace? Or?
We was at Fort Lewis, and they paid us at night and said, "Okay, my parents still didn't know I was coming home yet."
Yeah.
And when we got back to Fort Lewis, was able to get a phone, and so I would have been calling my parents probably 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And when my dad answered it, I said, "Dad," and I said, "I'm coming home." He said, and he just almost was quiet, and I kept thinking, "Oh, is he listening?" And he said, "I'll tell your mom." He said, "I'll be in sometime, I'll let you know." I said, "No." It was a big day for me.
All right. Now, when you fly back home, let's see, did you fly in uniform, or did you put on civilian clothes?
I was in uniform.
Okay. And did you have any problem with protesters?
Oh, I would say no. I wouldn't have in Cedar Rapids. I mean,
Well, not in Cedar Rapids.
No, but I flew. I mean, I flew from down to Denver, and I think I didn't have a whole lot of time. Maybe from Denver to Chicago. I don't know, but it seemed like I was on the run. I was hoping I was going to catch my flight, and I know a lot of guys had problems, but I didn't.
Good. Okay. And then once you're back home then, now what do you do?
First thing I wanted to do was to go to church. I mean, that was it for me. And of all the things, because I was raised 2 doors from our church. I mowed the yard. I was a janitor at the church for 4 years. And I had perfect attendance, all this stuff. And right before I left, the minister we had was an ex-Navy chaplain. And he was a great guy. And I remember while I was over there, I was Protestant, but I had a Catholic minister come up to Mom and Dad and said, we're praying for him, and which helps to me. And my first thing was, the Army didn't bring me home. I know I should have passed or died over there. I had just too many things that was just too close. And that's when I wanted to go back and thank God that I made it home.
When you were in Vietnam, did you attend services
I
of some kind?
attended anything that came out. I went to Catholic masses, I went to Protestants, I went to Lutherans, Presbyterians, and I did one Jewish one. You know, whoever came was good. I didn't care. Or basically,
It's the same God.
it's the same God.
There you go.
And so I did it. And the first thing I want to do was go to church. I went down to my church, walked in, they had a new minister, and he was shorter than I was. And he got up and for 1 hour told how awful it was for people that was in Vietnam, and how basically it was, talk about hurt. I mean, that hurt me as much as about anything that I did in the year before. It hurt.
So was he basically attacking American involvement in Vietnam?
He's just attacking why we're there, and the people, if you know, we're killing innocent people and all this stuff. And I don't know if my parents got up, but man, by the time I left, I was almost lost for words. To this day, if I'd ever see him, I'd cold cock him. He ruined it. And I went back next week. I thought, oh, okay, I'll give him a second chance. He did it again, not as bad. And I never went back to church. And it wasn't that I didn't believe, but I thought some guy like that's not going to tell me, you know. Yeah. And it was, you know, it of all the things when I came back, that one hurt the most, by far.
Yeah.
And it still does to this day.
That was, I mean, for you, that was a way of restoring normal.
That one was a shot to the belly.
Yeah, you get that. So, practical level, do you go find a job, go to school? What do you do next?
I knew I wasn't really cut out for college. I have a sister, both of them have college educations. My younger one is smarter than smart. And it's not that, I just thought, it's not for me. And when I got back, I had 6 months to go, so I was at Fort Hood, Texas. I went to Fort Hood, Texas. And since I was an E5, they gave me a track, APC. I was a second armored. And I said, what do I do with it? I've never been on tracks. We've been walking in the mountains and flying helicopters. And I had it for 2 days. I learned how to start it, open the doors, and that was about it.
Okay.
And I got called, and first sergeant there said, he was one of the first sergeants in our battalion in Vietnam. He said, you guys were great. So he made me a recruiting NCO.
Okay.
I said, do I have to recruit? I said, I have no intentions of going, you know. But I found you could see who was getting the money when you're recruited. Infantry wasn't getting nothing, and for the most part. And so I did that until I got out, and I mean, I had nothing. Everybody's at the motor pool, and I'm a recruiter. And the only time everybody gets to come to see me is after 4 or 5 in the afternoon, or at lunch. And so I just had to be there for lunch, or, you know.
Was this a recruiting station that was on the base, or was this?
I was a recruiting sergeant at company level. Okay. And if, like I said, if you would say, okay, I want to re-enlist, I'd say, walk with me. We'd walk down about 200 yards into the battalion, and I'd give it to that guy, and he signs you up.
Okay.
And I walk back.
Wow.
So yeah, and I had a carpeted office. I had my own, you know, like, and there was already a guy that did it, and so there's 2 of us recruiting it, And we're, okay, then they said, you guys are also are safety NCOs. What do you gotta do there? Gotta put your name on every fire extinguisher in the battalion or a company, you know, okay, pin's not pulled, it's good. And, you know, every once in a while we'd have to, they'd put us in a Jeep, we'd ride around at night and say, you know, check out the companies. But that was my job, and after about a few months, I said, this is really getting sort of old here, and I had, they called a surprise formation, and I know what it was. First sergeant and my E6 were out drinking, and they thought, well, it would be fun to have a surprise formation call at 2 in the afternoon. And I was basically, so I would have been with headquarters, and usually there's 25, 30 in that group, and then you have first platoon, second platoon, whatever. And they brought everybody back from the motor pool, and I get down there, they call an inspection, there's 3 of us, and we're supposed to know where everybody is. I had not a clue. Mm-hmm. And so, and my E6 sergeant, he was a really nice guy, but, you know, and he was so drunk he couldn't stand up. And he says, Sergeant Flansburg, you take over. I'm looking at 2 guys, and the first sergeant comes around and goes, where is everybody? I said, we're all present and accounted for. And I gave him the salute. He looked at it too, and he just shook his head and walked away. I had no idea where anybody was. I'm sure there were movies or something, but I had no idea.
Okay.
You know, and then after a while, I was going. My dad was by himself. He was doing plumbing and heating and wiring. My mother had gone into a hardware store and was running that. I wrote Dad a letter. I said, why don't you write one that says I'll come back and work for you and get me out a month or 2 early. So he did. I gave him the letter. He copied it and sent it back. We figured out what would work, and then I left about April, I'm guessing.
Okay.
So.
All right. And then did you just go back to work in the hardware store?
I went back, and yeah, I learned how to be a plumber and a wire, or did electrical and heating and air conditioning. And I did that for the next 30 years.
All right. Now, when you look back now at your time in the service and time in Vietnam, how do you think that affected you, or what did you learn from it?
I didn't mind service. One of the people that I worked for at home, when I knew him, I worked for farmers a lot when I was in high school, and I'd help them make hay. That's when their bales were small. And when I got back, when I left, because I worked for him, he was a major. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got back, he was a brigadier general. Mm-hmm. And he said, we'll get you a commission as a lieutenant if you go back in the reserves and the National Guard reserves. And I thought, no. And there's times I wished I had, but I also know if I go in as a butterball lieutenant, it's not going to be any different if I was a buck private, you know, because they're going to pick on you. And I said, why do you want to move me from being a sergeant to a lieutenant? He says, because you have combat experience. And I kept thinking, then I thought to myself, you know, I wasn't the most good guy for listening to doing what I was told. And I did things I shouldn't, so I declined. Mm-hmm. But later on I was put in to an honor thing in our county, name on a granite rock for whatever I did overseas. So.
Okay. Did you
so
ever?
It was good. I enjoyed the service.
Okay. Did you carry with you any of the kind of negative stuff? I mean, they talk about different sort of PTSD reactions or things. Do you have problems with loud noises or other things?
You know, I never thought I did. I knew I was, you hear these guys, oh, I'm 40%, 50% disabled, you know, and you're about as disabled as I am. And I did go and probably 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years ago, I said, hey, I do have diabetes. And he goes, well, that's Agent Orange. So I collected disability for that. And actually, it was last week I went in, but there was a guy that was down at the VA. I think he was a nice guy, but when you're talking to him, it's like, you're coming here 30 years later and you got problems, and it's like, it's not my, you felt like you're screwing the government. I kept thinking, oh, well, so I didn't do anything.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't hear. I mean, tinnitus to me is, I thought everybody had ringing in your ears like that. I mean, I've got hearing aids in now, and I could hear buzzing over those. And so I went in last week, and I asked the guy, one of the guys, I said, he's still not there, is he? He goes, no, that's the way he treated people. And I said, I'm sure I've got some PTSD. And I said, I didn't have it until I retired. Because then all of a sudden you have the time, and you're thinking about it, you're more relaxed, and so I'm going to put in for PTSD and tinnitus if I can get it.
Okay.
Other than that, no, I've been lucky I didn't get the cancers. I mean, they burned stuff off my face, but I'm outside. I can't blame the service so much for that.
Yeah. All right, well, I'd just like to thank you for taking the
No,
time to share the
well,
tour.
sorry for taking up too much of it.
Not at all. Tape is cheap.